But man, I love your story. I love your memory and your award-winning brain, and I want to get into all of that. So to begin with, I want to ask you, we look at the calendar 4 years ago, everything stopped. The pandemic took its toll. How did you survive the pandemic and how did it change you?
Yeah, pandemic was actually good for me for business. When everything shut down, I got a big boost in memory clients. So I was the number one. If you Googled memory coach, I was the number one result in Google
Okay.
because I'm a three-time memory champ, US memory champ. At the time, it was only for one time, but people were like all over the world, bored, stuck at home, like messaging me, hey, I want memory lessons. I want to learn something. I want to do something while I'm just sitting around twiddling my thumbs. So it was really good for me. It got me into a space where I was helping people solve problems and be creative. I mean, I was helping an actress learn to memorize lines, an actress who was in the show about the Royals on Netflix. I was helping engineers learn to memorize like all the things that they need to learn and work or Cisco systems and like anything in between, students, you name it. So it was a lot of fun. Just and at the same time, my daughter was born, first daughter. She was a COVID baby. So I had plenty to do. I was raising my first child, being on Zoom all over the world, teaching people memory techniques. So it was a lot of fun.
It's interesting. I was thinking during the pandemic, whenever you have a child, they always say if they hear extra voices in the room or classical music played by the room, that it increases their intellect. And because we were all inside during the pandemic, I thought about the possibility of a quasi Spielberg script where all of these babies that are born during this time become the COVID kids, and they end up coming up with a way to end the COVID strand, to end the possibility of pandemics happening, and this would be the generation that would do it. So it would be
That's
kind of
a,
cool.
I love that theory. Yeah, and
Yeah.
for some reason, kids have that immunity to it. So, um, yeah, this generation's different, and they're built differently, obviously through COVID. Like my daughter, as an infant, going into a grocery store, everyone's wearing a mask, and I thought this is so harmful that she can't even see people's smiles and facial
Yeah.
features and expressions, except mine and her mother's. And that was bizarre. I mean, she's very well adapted now, but you wonder some of these effects it had on kids for
You
sure.
know, I think what happens is that you abate all of that by developing extra sensory things. For instance, I have a jazz radio show, and I just 2 weeks ago saw a musician. His name is Matthew Whitaker. He's a prodigy, and he's the youngest person to ever get signed by Yamaha at 15, got signed by Hammond at 12, and I couldn't believe what I was watching, and he's blind. He was like Stevie Wonder. It was I've never seen genius on an instrument like that. It totally, and my wife and I were talking about it, and it was like he had a Hammond behind him and a piano in front of him, and he would just swivel around, and he was so adept at it and so in tune with the audience. And I think when you get one or two senses that are taken away, it just heightens the other senses. So his level of sound and acumen of feel is beyond anything that we can comprehend with all of our senses.
Mm. I love that because
Yeah,
that's the journey I've been on the last couple of years is tuning into my intuition,
yeah,
getting out of the head, because I'm a memory champ. I'm a mind guy. My whole life I've thrived up here, but
yeah,
it caused me so many issues of anxiety, panic attacks that I had to learn how to go from the head to the heart and
yeah.
tune in exactly to what you're talking about because there's a feel to people. Some things you can't explain, even spiritual gifts come online, when you're in tune with your heart instead of like living up here trying to survive or figure everything out all the time.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think he's fused both of it. And I think as magnanimous as the music was and how he transformed that crowd and the way he was, I think there's a light that comes out of him because he's figured it out that is impenetrable. And if we had more of him on this planet to spread and spill that light, because no one's going to kink his armor. And he was the kind of guy that like all he wanted to do was have fun. And he was like, I want to meet all of you in the lobby afterwards. We come up in the lobby and all of a sudden he's right there. We're like handshake. And I interviewed him before, so we kind of talked a little bit. But it's just amazing to have that level of spirit and soul on this planet because we need that positivity in such a magnanimous way in these days, I think.
Yeah. He's gotten rid of a lot of his suppressed energies that are keeping him trapped in his mind, like so many of us know. Like there's so much fear and like mental rumination that prevents us from allowing us to flow through the heart because
Yeah,
he doesn't let that stuff get in his way because
never.
he's faced it, released it, allowed it to move through him
Uh-huh.
instead of and being like a vessel for that.
Yeah,
Because when you're in your heart, you're in the moment. Like there's no script.
yeah.
You're letting that divine intelligence flow through you as your like pure essence. So that's beautiful.
It's like Michael Jordan playing ball at the highest level. It's just
Yeah.
that's it. It's essence. So I want to get to the essence of you. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at career day, and one of the kids looks up and says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you
Yeah.
answer that child?
I tell him I'm a three-time US memory champion. I've learned how to remember information using techniques and cool tricks with my brain. I'm not gifted. I wasn't born this way, but I learned how to do it. And anyone can do this with their imagination. Something that you third graders are very in tune with your imagination. And as adults, we sort of lose that. But I can tell you, as a 37-year-old myself, my imagination is sharper than or as sharp as those third graders.
Yeah,
And that's the key.
yeah. You know what's interesting? My son's on the autism spectrum, and he had a friend for years and years who was genuinely autistic, and she could do this thing where she could memorize the specific day of a birthday of anybody or just in general of dates. And you could say to her for the following year, your birth date, and she would say the day in a second.
Mhm.
And she did that. And I still to this day don't know how she did it. And the parents don't know how she did it. She would just look at a calendar and that was it. She'd look at it once, if even that. So from somebody that's a memory champ, how do you think in a synapse way that's firing and registering for her?
There is actually a way to do that, to learn how to do that. And I don't know if she intuitively figured that out, but I've seen mental calculations and date calculations. There's like a formula that you can learn to do it on your own and practice it. So she probably tapped into an intuitive understanding, like seeing the map of calendars and dates and like intuitively figuring it out. That's
Yeah.
genius, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wild. It freaked me out. Like anybody that would come up to her, she would just know it. There was never one time she said it wrong. So it's just one of those savant things that's pretty amazing, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Yeah.
So take me back to your childhood. Where were you born and raised, and how did you get to a point where your memory became your focal point? You became a champion.
Yeah. That's what Grace, I was born in a small town in Michigan, Three Rivers, which is just south of Kalamazoo, close to Indiana. I mean, small town, um, middle class family, loving family. To fast forward to the truth of it all with memory, I was not born with a photographic or genius memory at all. It wasn't until I was 27 years old that I read a book. It's the only memory book I've ever read. It's called Moonwalking with Einstein, The Art and Science of Remembering Everything. This book is like, this guy thought these memory people were savants. Photographic memory, all the stuff that you hear is almost a myth. And it intrigued me because he learned that these normal people were learning memory techniques and ways to enhance your memory and creativity. And these people were like memorizing shuffled decks of cards within minutes or seconds. I was like, I want to try that. That's cool. I just started off as that sounds awesome. I want to learn. And within a week, I learned how to memorize a shuffled deck of cards. And so at 27 years old, I just started practicing these techniques that involve in imagination and spatial memory, like using places you know well, using associations you know well to connect information in your mind so that you know where it is. Like when you search for your information, you see it, you know where to search. And so I just practiced that. And let's see, 27, and I won 4 years later, I won my first USA Memory Championship just by continuing to practice and compete. So there's no innate intuitive ability I had. I just tapped into what we all have, which is creativity, intuition, some left-brained ability too, but it's merging the left and the right because you see these people memorizing. Like I memorized the shuffle deck of cards in 21 and a half seconds. And I use my right brain for the structure, converting the cards into images. But then that transfers over to my, my right brain, where now I'm using those images, creatively seeing them and creatively attaching them to a place that I know. So I'm merging imagination with some structure, tapping into some intuition in that heart that you talked about earlier, and just very quickly creating a story that helps me remember that deck of cards. It's almost the same for memorizing names or words or numbers or whatever you
Yeah.
want to memorize.
I remember at one point I was in my early 30s and I really wanted to get into ESP, not specifically mind reading, but that realm of like having
Yeah.
lucid dreams and being able to go in and take control. And I was reading that book and things were starting to kind of transpire because it was also talking about how, that whole phenomenon where you run into somebody, say in Amsterdam, that you knew from your hometown, like what are the chances? And I've heard Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about it's not as specific as you think it is. I mean, it can happen. It's just a part of it. But also, too, I think I think if you open yourself up like that to the idea that that can happen, and you just because your brain's a muscle. I mean, it's like your body. It's like when people are working out. So I guess that's my question to you, the general theory of like if you really want to absorb and exercise this main muscle, which is our brain, it's totally attainable to do that for anybody.
It's knowing how to use it too,
Yeah.
right? And I would say a lot of people are obsessed with the brain these days, hack your brain, all these things, and that's great and all. But yeah, you have to know your brain there's a balance to it. You've got a left brain, a masculine structure, logic, reason. But then you also have a right brain, a creative, an intuitive, like, and you harmonize those two because in the West, in our culture, in the US, we're so hammered on logic and left brain and analysis and research and stuff. It everyone is disharmonized in the brain. We're completely left brain people. And if you bring that balance back and know how to trust what comes to you, like if I was to memorize something and you gave me a random name, I would trust the first thing that downloaded in without me Google searching, if that makes sense. So a lot of
Yeah.
people are left-brained like, what's the perfect answer? What do I use to memorize this? Where do I put this? Right? And
Uh-huh.
it's so clunky and disorganized and slow. But if you harmonize that to right brain, right, and allow something to come in and trust it, you have something almost instantaneously. So if someone's trying to hack their brain or improve their brain, yes, it is a muscle, but I think it's more of a harmony, bringing harmony to your right brain. Or if you're very creative, bringing that structure back, that left brain, finding a balance. Because when you find and I don't even like the word balance, finding a harmony, that's where the genius comes out. When you find that harmony for you instead of over dominant one way or over dominant another way.
Yeah, I got a pretty hungry brain, and that might be why I'm an IT technician by day, and then I do visual arts and writing and different
So you
things.
got both. Yeah, you got
Yeah.
both.
So but I understand it's hard to put into words, but I understand what you're saying about the levels of memorization because there's certain things and ways that I can take in like IT information that is a steel trap. Like I lock it in and I don't question why I remember or why it's like right there. But it is kind of like that zone that athletes talk about, like Jordan would talk about. You just get into this chamber and it's just you fly, you float. It's like watching this guy play the piano. It was like someone dumped a bag of feathers over the top of the piano keys and they just all went down. But there was this genius unison of just flow. And it wasn't even precise flow, it just sonically happened in a way that is like watching something in nature happen that's beyond our comprehension. It's
Yeah.
just serene and magical, and you don't question it because it's just a part of the mechanism of being a human on this planet.
Yeah. That's a flow state,
Yeah,
and flow very simply to me means no resistance. Like a
yeah,
river flowing, it flows because there's nothing damming it up, no boulders in the way. If you
yeah,
have no resistance, no inner resistance to what's happening in front of you, you will flow.
yeah,
But to flow, you also need structure, right? So you're good at IT in that steel trap because you're in a zone of structure of IT. You understand IT, you've been around it, you have that structure where we're not talking about elephants or like biology. We're not talking about anything. There's a structure. And so in that structure, if you can relax and have no inner resistance to what's happening, you can absolutely flow.
Yeah.
And that's where that happens.
So who's your favorite brain? Your favorite person, thinker that's been on this planet. Who is that you admire?
Gosh, the first person that comes to my mind is Michael Singer. He wrote The Untethered Soul, just a
Okay.
very adept spiritual soul who really has a profound influence in my life. And it's not even that he's a thinker, he is tapping into a divine flow and essence that's coming outside of him. Because I think what I'm really trying to say is thinking is great. You know, I've thrived on the mind. I love the mind, but there's a realm beyond your mind where you're tapping into something. And I think people that tapping into a greater intelligence outside of them and letting that flow through them are, I would consider them thinkers. I would consider them more intuitive, spiritual, you know, guru. And I wouldn't even like the word gurus, like yogis, just
Yeah.
people who are tapped into something beyond ourselves. Because that's where I'm at in my life now is I'm beyond the wanting to know and memorize everything and retain everything and think too much. I want to step outside of that because I'm noticing a growth and expansion beyond all that.
What I've noticed being in jazz radio, I've been doing it since 2011, is that there's certain people that I'll talk to, like Sonny Rollins, Dr. Lonnie Smith, the late Randy Weston. When I got off the phone with them, I call them the Jazz Jedi Council. They're the ones that are in Cloud City and Empire. There's a level of magic, mystique, being humble, being grounded. They're improv masters. There's something different, and it's unreal. Like when I step away from having a conversation, there's this gentle intelligence that's open to anything, and they're so positive. It's unreal. And it's kind of like what you're talking about. Like
Yeah.
I never thought I just didn't know how I would ever run into that it existed, but it does. Because sometimes people have to see it in a movie, but it happens in life.
These are people who've devoted themselves to, I would say, almost getting out of their way or letting go of themselves, letting go of an identity, like I was saying, beyond. Because when you let go of all of the static that's accumulated your whole life, the conditioning, the suppressed emotions,
Yeah,
when you start moving through that, you're not blocked anymore. And so
yeah,
this, you talk about it, you've talked about it several times, this genius, this wisdom that flows through people, it's because they've devoted themselves to peeling away the layers, not adding a bunch of stuff on top of them, but like removing all the friction that's in the way to allow this, their pure essence to just flow out and it's magic.
yeah,
Like that's what I'm discovering myself. When I get let go of all this conditioning, all these reactivity, all this suppressed energy inside of me, stuff flows magically and I perform better, I flow better, I'm more at peace, I'm more present. And I think those people that you're mentioning, they've devoted themselves to just being them, like being their pure self without all this static
yeah,
surrounding them. That we all know what we're talking about. We all have that.
yeah. So who's the first person you called after you won your first championship?
Yeah. I mean, everyone that I love was there.
Oh,
I called my mom
yeah,
and told her. Yeah, it was surreal holding that trophy. I'll tell you something. People talk about manifestation all the time, right? For a couple years before I won that, every night before I went to bed, not every night, but most nights, I would play some music, favorite song in my headset, and just like in my heart, imagine I won that trophy, won that award, won that championship because I wanted it so bad, trained so hard. And I felt it every day. I would cry, I would feel it, like the joy, the bliss of that day. And then when it actually happened, when I actually won and they announced me and I had to go and walk up to get my trophy, I literally felt like it was normal, that it had happened 1,000 times in my mind.
yeah,
I'd felt it, I'd been there, and I had to pinch myself. Is this the real one? You know? So when I won it, and this is disappointing to some people to hear, but I wasn't like I was enjoying the moment, but it felt normal to me,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know? like I had already achieved it in my mind. So
Destiny.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
destiny. Yeah.
So, of all of these things that you've accomplished and become and evolved, there's the awards, but there's a cellular level. What are you the proudest of?
The proudest I am is that I overcame chronic anxiety, panic attacks. Um, my grandfather committed suicide at the end of 2022. It was the most insane moment of my life because it came out of nowhere. That started me on a journey, like all of this anxiety, all this tension inside of me, it just came to a boiling point of rage, of just like it was just so manifested underneath me that I had to change something in my life.
Yeah.
Like learning to memorize things and win awards is cool and all, but I thought there was a point where I was having debilitating anxiety attacks, panic attacks every single day. And I had to let go of something that was in the way. I was so in control in my mind and so rigid that I wasn't flowing with life. So overcoming that not only has helped me feel at peace and present, like just for my daughters, for my life, for everything, my business, but I help people with that now
Yeah.
because I know how life crushing it is and how there's so many people out there suffering mentally and emotionally that don't have an answer, that manage it or cope with it. So I think that's the biggest thing for me is that's another reason why I'm peeling away from teaching memory and wanting to accumulate all this knowledge and like and letting go more because it's had a profound impact on my life.
So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, all of your fans, everyone around you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Yeah, I'm just a normal person who learns to do some extraordinary things. I'm not a savant, I'm not a genius. I'm a human being that has, just like so many people, had a lot of shame, had a lot of anxiety, had a lot of things internally that I'm dealing with. And I share that because I want to be real with people. People look at me and they think I'm some savant, superhuman genius, cool guy. And, of course I am. But
Yeah.
behind that, I'm a human being that's learning how to move through life too. And I say that because anyone listening can do profound things,
Yeah.
not just with their mind, but with the abilities and the desires, the nudges that you are being guided on, like go for them because you're being guided to follow your own essence and you don't be someone else. Right. So that's who I am.
Yeah. That's why those jazz cats are who they are. They're 100% them.
100% authentic.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to hire you, reach out, learn more about your incredible story, where do they go?
I have a free video guide, how to release your anxiety forever. And I mean that. It's at releasepanic.com/free. And you get on my email list too and follow along. I'm on Instagram at memoryjohng. You can follow me there, post some reels. But yeah, my main thing today is helping people unlock that inner ability, that inner expansion. Because when you expand inwardly, it changes your life. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I have just reserved Moonwalking with Einstein. I'm going to listen to that and I'm looking forward to it.
Heck yeah.
John, this has been illuminating. You're incredible, man. Thank you for your story. Thank you for opening up and being candid. And best of luck with everything else that comes your way.
Appreciate you.
You seem like you're on the top of that Maslowian pyramid, and it's so good to be around cats that are doing that, feeling the way life should feel, and it emanates from you. So thank you for your story.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate you and your gifts. You bring a lot of creativity to the stage too, and I like that. Thank
We're
you.
just having a good time, man. That's all we're trying
Yeah,
to do.
I love it. Thank
Thank
you.
you, John.
Thank you.